Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast brought to you by Twisted Tea and My Bookie. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter, and I'm joined as always by my cousin Shane, who goes by Big Orange Balls on Twitter. What's up, yo Mayo Bath, Tennessee Homer?
What's going on, son? Oh, I forgot my cold beer at the house. I messed up there, so sorry for no can opening experience. But it has been a wild 2 hours here, Mike.
Yep, we have got a fun show, Shay. This is our mailbag. We're doing it weekly.
Yep.
We're going to get the mailbag questions. We got Nick Roush,
Yes.
Kentucky Sports Radio. We got Mike Griffith, DawgNation. I mean, we have got one hell of a show. But before we get into any of that, Shane, we have got a Mayo bath for Tennessee beating South Carolina. Anybody that missed it, Shane bet on South Carolina to win outright. I bet Tennessee, and the loser had to do a Mayo bath. We're going to get to the Mayo bath. We filmed it and everything. We got 3 different angles. But before we get to that, Shane, just I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts before, and then we'll share your thoughts after the Mayo bath.
Well, I mean, obviously, before a few things ran through my head because I've never had mayonnaise dumped on me,
Right.
So I didn't know what the situation was going to be, and it adhered. I would say that it was thick. It was a thick substance, but the problem, Mike, was after.
Well, we'll get to that.
I gotta share this scene. So yeah, let me know when you're ready for that. I'm glad I got the bet out of the way. It kind of has been looming, not as bad as a 13-mile,
Right.
walk, but it definitely keeps popping up, and it's everywhere. I still smell it. I still smell mayonnaise. Of course, a big guy and smell like mayonnaise probably not news, but it is to me because I'm not usually a mayonnaise guy. So
Right. All right. So we're going to get to it. We filmed this outside. We didn't have the proper mic, so the audio's maybe a little different, but you ain't here for the audio. You're here for the video footage of Shane getting dumped on with the Mayo. So let's kick it over. All right, Shane, why are we here?
Wait 1 second. All right. So, I've made a lot of dumb, stupid bets in my life. This may top it, Mike. I don't know. 13 miles was rough. Florida Gators are still tweeting about that one. But, everybody that knows me knows that I'm terrible at gambling. I am 1 of 9 in my last locks. And I've never used that power to help the Tennessee Volunteers till this week. I talked so much shit about the Gamecocks all off season. I just knew that I seen the bookmarks out there. I knew that they were going to come after me if Tennessee were to drop another game to South Carolina, and it would be 2 years before we could redeem it. So I did what any diehard Volunteer fan would do. I fell on the grenade. I locked down South Carolina to not only cover the spread but win that game, just so the Vols could walk away victors. So do I have regrets? Up to this point, no. But I start to second guess it when I'm looking at this large vat of mayonnaise sitting here below Mike. But a deal's a deal. Bring on the Mayo, Mike.
Okay. Yeah, this is very much, very real, very much Mayo here. He's gonna get it here.
Oh shit! Here we go. My biggest concern is not being able to breathe. I don't know. I never did. Oh my god.
I'll let you finish your thought. You can look at it while we're sitting here.
Okay. I don't know. Let me just suck. Let me get some wind in here. You ready? 3. You do a countdown in your head there.
For the ball, Shane.
Okay, let's do it.
Oh my God.
Rocky Top, you'll always be home sweet home to me. Good old Rocky Top. Rocky Top. Go Balls, baby. Rocky Top, you'll always be home sweet home to me. Oh, Shane. Okay, let's do it.
All right, Shane. So, hey, I thought you looked good with the hair there, the Mayo hair.
Yeah, actually, when you paused it and looked at it there, I was like, huh, maybe I should get those, those hair implants I've been talking about, No, it was, like I said, it stuck to me. It's still with me. It's in the truck because I had to go home, and I know for 4 days, I'm going to smell mayonnaise, but it was a bet I owed. It was a bet I was glad to take care of, and if I got to dump mayonnaise on me every week to let the Vols win, by God, I'd do it. You know what I'm saying? And I think there's a lot of fans out there listening to the show that would do the same thing for their team. So
right. So it was worth it for a Tennessee win in that crucial game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not making any. I got to be careful with my words now because then it gets clipped and put out there. There's some pretty savvy videos and clips I've already seen floating around. Yeah. So this is going to be one. And what's funny is you don't think about it right now. It's 2023. We're just putting the content out there, but there's going to be a day like 40 years, 30 years from now, my little grandson's going to come up to me or, whatever it is.
Right.
I'm not speeding up my grandchildren or anything like that. I don't have any, but there's going to be a day they're on YouTube and they're going to be able to find this clip, So I always think about that. It's like, putting it out there is fun now, but 10, 15 years from now, I may have to answer for it again. So
yeah. And then I think the best part, Shane, when we were done.
Yes.
So they've been doing some work over here.
Yeah, I got you here, Mike. Okay, so Mike's saying I've been having some construction work done here around the house. So
but none in the back.
None in the back. So I want to set this scene. So this was videoed in the back of the property here, and there's a chair. There's 3 cameras, different angles, which you guys just got to experience. And there's mayonnaise everywhere. Okay, so Mike goes to take some of the stuff in the building or in the house here, and I went ahead and removed my shirt. All right, so because it's just caked on there. So about that time, construction workers walk behind the house, and all they see is a chair, 3 cameras, a fat guy with mayonnaise all over him, and dude, I could not. I was just like. I try to explain a million miles an hour. I didn't know if they understood what I was saying. I was just like, man, I lost a bet. I was just spitting stuff out, because his face, that facial reaction, when you come around the house and there's this fat guy with mayonnaise and there's 3 cameras pointing at him, it's like, what the fuck did I just walk into, It's like.
So I walked by him, Shane, on my way back to the house carrying one of the cameras, and I said, what kind of crazy porno are these hicks making? And they just started dying laughing. So, yeah, they knew. They didn't know what was up, but they had an idea what was up. They're totally off. But
oh, my gosh, man. Yes, that one, the bet sunk to a new low at that point, Mike. I put this video out there. There's going to be a lot of people watching it and stuff, and that was okay. But those 2 guys, That was the lowest of low because I didn't have time to really explain what we were doing.
All right, so let's move on from that. We'll never discuss that again, except for probably years to end. But we got a mailbag to get to, brother. So we got a lot of mad fans, people ready to fire their coach. Get this guy out of here. This guy can't coach. And so we're not picking on anybody because there's several here to pick from. But let's start, Shane, with Draven Arnold.
Okay.
Off Instagram. If the Razorbacks miss a bowl game, does Sam Pittman make it through the off season? And if they miss a bowl game, when we came in, we were thinking 7, 8 wins.
Yeah.
We're talking 5. Again, I'm not hitting the panic button, Shane. I think A&M, their front 7 is incredible. I think we're going to see more of that on Saturday. So I'm not hitting the panic button. Not that I was happy. Hell, we picked Arkansas to win. We looked foolish. The Maggies have been letting us know all week. So it's not, I'm not sitting here making excuses, but they just lost to 2 really good teams, I think. I'm not hitting the panic button. But, yeah, if they don't make a bowl, I could see change being made. But I certainly expect them to make a bowl.
Yeah, what's their schedule? Do you got that pulled up?
Yes, sir.
I don't have mine pulled up here.
So they got at Ole Miss this week.
All right, so how many wins they got right now?
They have
3?
2.
Shit. So I got to get 4 more wins here.
Right, but listen to the schedule. So at Ole Miss, that's a tough one. At Bama, another tough one, but maybe not as tough as people think, if I'm right. But then here we got, this is where you can get your 4, I think. Mississippi State at home. At Florida, which will be coming off Georgia.
Okay.
Auburn at home, FIU at home, and Missouri at home.
Buddy, I'm telling you, there's a possibility. I don't want to be the negative guy, But, right now, I don't feel good about Ole Miss. I definitely don't feel good about Alabama. I don't feel good about Mizzou. I don't feel good about, hell, even Auburn. You know?
But Mizzou's going to go through a gauntlet too, brother. We're sitting here looking at undefeated Mizzou.
Yeah, but again, it's different. It's a rivalry, and
it's a home game. Listen, here's what Mizzou will go through before that: LSU, at Kentucky, undefeated, South Carolina, at Georgia, Tennessee, at home, Florida at home, and then Arkansas.
Damn, undefeated. I don't see the tough game in there, Mike. No, I'm just kidding. But back to the Arkansas argument, it's still, there have been games that we've already, BYU, that we penciled in a victory. Why you're looking at Auburn that's the one that stands out to me because they just went toe to toe with Georgia. Where's that one at?
At Arkansas.
Okay, well that's a little better. So I'm not predicting that they don't go to a bowl, but I am saying that if they don't, I don't think he continues. I think that's one of your first fires of the offseason. Sad, but that's what happens.
Well, there may be another one, according to Sam Burnson off YouTube, saying, should Billy be fired if the Gators go 5-7 or worse, or should he be given another year regardless of the record? And we're sitting here, Shane, with them Florida Gators. They've won, 3 games.
Yeah.
So he's saying 5-7 or worse. So they got to win 2 more.
2 more, right? But they got a tough.
How sad is we're sitting here, Florida? You got to win 2 of the final 7. But Vanderbilt at home, you should easily.
There's your win.
At South Carolina, Georgia and Jacksonville, Arkansas at home, at LSU, at Mizzou, Florida State at home. Not a gimme in there after Vanderbilt.
No. I think Vanderbilt. What was the third team that you had?
Georgia.
Second team
at South Carolina.
Which
they've sold out already,
brother. But if you're chasing a bowl game, it's got to be done. It's got to be wrapped up. I think in the first 2 weeks here, because obviously Arkansas. Yeah, that could go. It's a coin toss. We just talked about their program, but
that might be Arkansas at Florida. Whoever wins saves their job. It might be that.
Yeah, it may come down to that one. So, but that's where we're at. I don't know, man. It's like everybody wants to get onto the recruiting class, what they got coming in. You know, Billy's a slow build. It's his second year. You know, blah blah blah. I don't think he loses his job. I don't think they can.
I don't either.
I don't think they can necessarily
unless they lose to Vanderbilt.
Oh, buddy, if they lose out,
right?
If they lose out, then you can make the argument. Or if, let's say, they don't make a bowl and they just get destroyed by teams like Florida State and
LSU,
where it's just
Georgia.
an absolute embarrassment.
That's the thing I was going to say, Shane. I mean, hell, 2 weeks ago we were crowning this guy.
Yeah, I know.
This is the Billy method.
Bounce back, Billy.
Yeah, Tennessee, overrated. We killed them.
Yeah,
we're going. This is who we are now. So it's wild. We're getting 2 weeks later. Is this guy gonna make it? But to me, I think you hit on the most important thing, and that's exactly what I was going to say, Shane. Not that we're happy with 5 and 7. Not that that's the standard. Not that 6 and 6. Hell, I mean, the standard at Florida is like 9, 10 wins.
Right.
I think.
Yeah,
or should be. And some years that's not. Steve Spurrier left because he said 10 win is not good enough for these people.
Yeah.
You know, we're a long way from that. But the point being, Shane, are we getting destroyed by Georgia? Are we getting destroyed by LSU? Are we getting destroyed by Florida State? And hell, any of these other teams, South Carolina, Arkansas, Missouri.
Yeah.
If we're getting our ass kicked in the majority of these games, yeah, I'm firing them.
Yeah.
But if we lose to Georgia by 3, we lose at LSU by 7, we lose to Florida State on a last-second field goal, I ain't firing this guy.
No.
Because they're still fighting.
Right.
And they're just losing to better teams. And a lot of these are on the road. So, again, they got to clean up a lot of stuff, but I think it's a little early to be firing all these coaches.
Well, since we're talking about it,
yeah.
If you had a short list of hot seats right now in the SEC, who's at top? Let's give me your top 3 right now, hot seats.
Probably Zach Arnett.
Yeah.
That's probably it for me, honestly.
Really?
I don't
So you
know
got
many
tiers, huh?
Because I just don't know if he can cut it as a head coach.
Right, I get it.
And
I get it.
we've seen him for 5 games.
Yeah.
That's probably not even fair to say. But I think but that's what we said all off season too.
Right.
Can this guy cut it?
And then I mean, in the back of our minds, we always thought he was a filler anyway.
Right.
You know, so I think keeping that recruiting class, thinking some of the in-state talent or just the roster itself, you know, it made sense to keep him, but I don't know. You know, you're trying to put a Band-Aid on a gushing wound, it felt like. So
right. So yeah, I really don't have a hot seat ranking.
But I mean, you kind of do there.
But well, this will get to it because we got one more. Let's fire this guy.
Okay.
Norm Silver's off Twitter. Do you think Zach Arnett decision to fire Mike Leach's offensive staff will cost him his job if Mississippi State goes 0-8 in the SEC? And I think again, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not sitting here saying they're going to go 0-8. Now, that's crazy. This is a proud program. That hell, Shane. I mean, a lot of these fans thought 7-8 wins was the standard going into this year, and clearly, I don't think they're going to get there. But they got Western Michigan, easy win. But if they go 0-8, this is who they lose to, Shane. At Arkansas, at Auburn, Kentucky at home, at Texas A&M, and then Ole Miss at home. I mean, if they play as poorly as we've seen at times, they could lose all those games.
Yeah.
And I'm not predicting it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying they could. And if they do, yeah, I think we can't do this. This is Mississippi State.
Yeah.
0-8, that ain't cutting it for any fan base. And it sure as hell isn't for, remember I said Mississippi State, they got, I believe, the second longest bowl streak in the SEC. 0-8 with again, I voted them 7th.
Right.
And I got jumped on. You always vote Mississippi State 7th, even though I've only done it like twice out of 8 years. But I didn't have high expectations, but I got much higher than 0-8, as does that fan base. If they go 0-8, I think we got to make a move.
I think so too, because again, what is the future like? Like, why keep playing this game for a couple, 2-3 more seasons when you could? I mean, that hurts you financially,
right?
So yeah, I would imagine in the SEC, you gotta do it now. And Arnett had an opportunity. He went out, and I told you the most crucial hire this offseason was that coordinator at offense, and it's not working out. It's a flat out disaster right now. So, and it may cost him a game. It may cost him a job. So, Arnett's going to be around. He's going to be around some storied programs forever because he is a great defensive mind, and given the talent, he can do some special things on that side of the ball. But I'm not convinced head coaching is in his future. So, yeah.
Hell of a defensive coordinator, though. If
I'm tearing it, I'd have Arnett 1. I would probably have Billy number 2, and then I'm going to go with Sam number 3. That would be my order if we're looking at hot seats. And like you, I only think one of those are getting fired.
And then he'll be the defensive coordinator at LSU immediately, Zach Arnett. You know what I mean? Like, get him down here, fix his defense. All right, how about this one, Shay? I like this one from Tanner Dodson off Instagram. Who are the dark horse candidates in the East and West? I assume he means to win the division, after week 5. And I'll give you my biggest one. Okay. Alabama.
Yeah. Is it?
I mean, if they win at A&M,
you can't get back on that wagon, Mike.
But I don't think they are. I don't think they're. Yeah. So that's a dark horse.
What's his name? Feinbaum. He'll be up there kicking you right off. Larry. Larry. Yeah.
No, a biggest dark horse. I mean, it's probably Ole Miss, but they've got a big loss, and they're a very dark horse because they got to go to Georgia.
Yeah.
It's not. It is what it is, but they got the short end of the scheduling stick there, but. They can outscore anybody, it looks like.
Mine's Mizzou.
Mizzou?
Yeah, because you're catching LSU at the right time, I think. You don't have Georgia. You don't have Alabama. Or do they have Texas A&M? What's their schedule? What's Mizzou's schedule after LSU here? Because a one-loss team can still get in.
So they got LSU this week at home, at Kentucky.
Yeah.
Night game there. At South Carolina at home. At Georgia. Tennessee at home. Florida at home. At Arkansas.
Not easy, obviously. I mean, it's just going to boil down to who can beat Georgia out of the East, I think.
Right.
Is it Kentucky? You may feel confident that Kentucky's that team. You may feel confident that Mizzou's that team. But if you're picking a dark horse, I think it's got to be one of those two programs. Maybe, Tennessee... You
can't take them all, Shane, because then you're stealing mine.
I know, but now that I've just heard this question, so
I guess
you guys are in the brain with me right now, going down the halls trying to figure out what I'm going to say next. But that's kind of where I'm at. Is who can beat Georgia, and I think that's where you're at. Tennessee, Mizzou, Kentucky, whichever one you feel good about there. I think you got a good shot, and I like your Ole Miss pick out of the West.
And I would say Tennessee just because they host Georgia.
Yeah.
Now, do I feel confident about that? No. No, I do not, Shane. But Georgia...
You want to put mayonnaise bet on
it? Georgia is not the Georgia we, and we'll learn more. I mean, Kentucky gets Tennessee at home.
Right.
Kentucky gets Mizzou at home. I think that's probably the next best option, but I think I'd go Tennessee.
Tennessee.
With their running game, with their defense. And
it took a big step last week.
That's putting a lot of faith in Joe Milton that I don't have right now.
Yeah.
But if let's just say, and again, it's he's not awful. He gets criticized too much, but he got built up too much too.
Yeah.
If he can just play mistake-free football, let's say they run for 150 on Georgia.
Yeah.
The defense holds up, which is like, I guess Georgia's a really good team. When I say hold up, under 30.
Right.
And Joe Milton hits, he don't got to do a lot, brother, but like 3 deep balls.
Right.
I think they can beat Georgia at home.
The only problem with that scenario is you still got Alabama on there. I know. Well, you just dark horsed them, and now you're like, they suck again. But I'm saying, Tennessee has already got an SEC loss.
Kentucky's got Bama too, though.
Yeah, but
they get them at home.
If Tennessee loses, what I'm saying, dark horse is Georgia not getting in.
Right.
So even if you beat Georgia and lose to Alabama, Georgia still gets in, as long as they didn't lose to anybody else. So it's kind of a numbers game right now, and that's why I'm kind of leaning more toward Mizzou and Kentucky, just because they're undefeated and have no losses. So and if I had to pick one of those, of course I'm going to MIZ.
All right, we got some Kentucky fans, Shane, are feeling themselves. I'm just going to go in order here. Shane Alexander from Facebook.
Yeah, not related. Cousin Shane.
If Kentucky beats Georgia, can we bring the goalpost back to Lexington? I think Ollie will help him carry it up there.
Yeah, I saw his little video he sent out. I would love nothing else. I would love to see that happen. I just, when Kentucky went down and beat Florida, that was just, even though if you're not a Kentucky fan, you still felt the energy and just the decades and decades of just ass kicking that you've endured.
Right.
It was worth it for that moment. So, yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to see somebody get down there and try to tear down them damn goalposts.
And then on the similar vibe, Shane, Chris Spiller off YouTube. Can anyone in the East beat them Cats?
Can anyone in the East? There's a couple out there, I get it. I get it. Kentucky's on cloud nine, and they should be.
Right.
But they're still figuring themselves out, We've not seen a complete game.
Right.
And if they dial that up this weekend, who knows? Maybe nobody can beat them. So,
and then we got one more.
Yeah.
From starting to really like this guy, Shane. He trolls us, but loyal fan. They can troll us all they want. I don't care. Big Blue Boss off Twitter. Where should Kentucky be ranked when they beat Georgia? And hey, I gave Texas their credit because they went to Bama and beat the Crimson Tide. I said that was the best win of the season.
Yeah.
And I don't care what anybody thinks about Kentucky. If they win in Athens, that's the best win of the college football season. And this may sound outlandish, Shane, but if you beat, and this is Georgia logic that I don't subscribe to, but we're number one till we get beat. Well, if Kentucky comes down there in your turf and whoops your ass by 1 point, you should be number one. I mean, where's the debate?
Yeah.
You beat number one in their house, you're number one. You're undefeated. There is no good argument against that. If we're ranking on this season.
Kirby's using that this week. It's kind of weird. I'm not seeing a lot of propaganda thrown out there. We did, like with South Carolina, Tennessee the year before, like these fans don't get too loud. And then, we're not getting that with Kentucky, which I think is good. Creating a bullseye for yourself. But that's I don't know. This is something I've been thinking about. I'm sure he's got something he's bringing up. It may be this podcast. Who knows?
How about Ryan off Twitter, Shane? If you had to pick Mizzou or Kentucky to win the East, who would you lean towards right now? Mizzou or Kentucky? Who would you favor there? Neither one's played Georgia, obviously. They play next week in Lexington.
Kind of the same thing I talked about earlier. Because Alabama's on Kentucky's schedule, that's the only reason I'm leaning a little more toward MIZ.
Mizzou Shane.
Plus, I've got too much invested in this.
All right, last word, Shane, from Grant Wilburn off Twitter.
Yeah.
This is a really good one, too. What SEC program, and he says current, so he don't want Texas or Oklahoma, I would imagine, not named Georgia, has the highest ceiling in within the expanded conference?
Wait, say that again.
Which current SEC program, and do not include Georgia in this, has the highest ceiling in the future with the expanded conference? And I think what he's saying is with Texas and Oklahoma coming in, who's got the highest ceiling, not named Georgia, with Texas and Oklahoma coming in?
Whoa, I mean, you would think Alabama would be.
Would they? Was Saban, 90-year-old Saban there?
Well, I mean, still, it's Alabama,
Yeah, but he's saying the future, Shane.
God, you hate talking Bama at all. Okay, Auburn. There's another one. I think when you remove the divisions and now they don't have to play LSU every year, and hell, I don't know if they even play Georgia every year. You heard Hugh come out. Of course, I don't think that's true, but yeah, I think that's going to be your baby because again, you got to remember when we get away from divisions. One-loss teams can still make it to SEC championships. That's not like that. The East and West losses; those are pivotal. And now they're going to take the two best teams and a one loss, even if it's against, let's say, Georgia. In that scenario, if you got a one-loss Auburn against a one-loss Georgia, they're going to put them right back together for an SEC championship. They're not penalized because they had that. So,
right.
So when I think about that, I think, well, who can recruit? Whose future's brighter? Yeah, give me some Auburn.
I'll give you a different answer, Shane.
Yeah,
A&M.
Why? A&M came up with me, but now Texas is looming. So even though we can't talk about Texas,
I think that's why.
Oh, you think so?
Because I think they're. I hate to give away picks, but I already did it on national television. I think they wallop Alabama.
Yeah.
And if they do that, Shane, the way LSU's trending,
yeah.
I mean, I think it comes down to A&M, Ole Miss for the West, and Ole Miss has already lost to Bama. They play at Georgia.
You're talking about West and East, though. We're talking about.
Well, all right, we'll give.
Okay.
This is all part of the narrative here.
All right.
Putting it. This is how my brain works, Shane. You said window into yours, window into mine. So A&M wins the West this year.
Yeah.
Let's just. I mean, that's realistic, right?
That's realistic.
If they beat Bama,
Yeah.
Saturday, I think they're the team to beat.
If or when?
Win. When they beat Bama.
Yeah.
So we got A&M. Finally, the key to this, Shane, is Jimbo giving his offense to Petrino.
Yeah.
And getting out away from the quarterbacks. I mean, not enough is that was the off-season joke, endlessly made. Oh, they're going to be at each other's throats.
Right.
They're going to be fighting. How many fist fights they going to have? And they ain't having fist fights, Shane.
Right.
What they have is the biggest turnaround in the SEC on the offensive side of the football because he handed the keys away. Jimbo's learning. He's adapting. You said it yourself, recruiting. They're recruiting like crazy.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see that pay off on that defensive line. And I think with Texas, again, we're not putting Texas into this, but he's saying an expanded conference. Texas looks damn good, Shane.
Yeah.
There was someone on Feinbaum, I think it was Bruce Feldman, said, this is a legit playoff, maybe national contender. He's talking Texas.
Yeah.
Which that's probably accurate. But I'm saying A&M too. They got all the money in the world. If Texas comes in and they're a playoff bound or in that discussion, all the efforts that these A&M boosters have, it's going to get ramped up.
Right.
Because by God, we are not letting Texas come into this conference and dominate it. We'll throw even more money at Jimbo Fisher and company. And I don't have a ton of faith in Jimbo, but the team is what it is, and it's looking good. And I think Saban's on a decline. And maybe, there's so many people, Shane, that hate Brian Kelly and think, he could never get it done. And I'm not ready to go that far because he won the West year one. I mean, I think it's kind of crazy to call this guy out, but so many people hate that guy and said he'll never win in the SEC, could never win at Notre Dame. Maybe they're right. So I don't know that LSU's that option either, but I think they're a close second. Auburn, that's another good one with Hugh Freeze. But give me A&M, Shane, because they got that recruital area. They're going to be going head-to-head to Texas every year. And who knows? I mean, we said this in the preseason, and it sounded crazy, and it still does a little bit because everybody's got Georgia penciled in. But the national championships in Houston, Shane, in Texas A&M could be on a collision course this year to meet in that game. And if they do, God, those boosters are not...
Yeah.
They're throwing all their money in, because they want this to continue, and they don't want Texas to get the upper hand, and Texas fans don't want A&M to get the upper hand. So this could be like a 10-year war here.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Let me flip it a little bit, though. When we go to this expansion, is there any teams that's going to hurt?
Yeah, it's probably going to hurt a lot.
I mean, the first one that came to my mind was Kentucky. You know, I'm not saying that their permanent West opponent is inferior because they've had some tough fought football games the last few years, but you know, it's not an Alabama, it's not an LSU. You know, the East outside of Georgia and Tennessee one year, Florida the next year, it's like they have two serious tough opponents, it seems like every year. And then there's a handful of like 50-50 games, it feels like. You know, I think when you remove that and now you've got teams like Texas and Oklahoma on your schedule every year, that I think that may be a program that kind of takes a hit a little bit.
Yeah, I think it potentially hurts a couple of the East teams.
Yeah.
Because they're
more the East because Vanderbilt.
We're getting away from these divisions.
Right.
We're getting away from, I mean, Missouri and Kentucky are good now. Right. For the last 10 years, they've been hit and miss. Tennessee's been hit or miss.
Right.
Tennessee, more than any of them, has been hit or miss. And now they're rolling a little bit. So I think having to play more West teams, having to play Texas and Oklahoma, potentially that hurts you.
Yeah.
I do think. But I also think those teams are going to be able to recruit better because I've said this many times. SEC is going to be mini NFL.
Yeah.
The best recruits, the best transfers, they're going to want to come, I think. Best coaches to prove themselves. So potentially, I think there's a couple teams in the East that could hurt. And the one power that it shouldn't, Florida. I think it could hurt them.
Yeah.
Because they're still trying to find footing under Napier.
Right.
And it's just going to get harder.
Get tougher, absolutely. You're still going to have Florida State.
Yeah.
You're still going to have, I don't know who they're.
Miami's looking good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could hurt in-state recruiting.
No, that's a good one. So, I don't know. It's interesting to see how that plays out. And of course, we're going to have all off season to bring that one up. But yeah, this is the last. We're changing the landscape of how we think college football works. You know, with these divisions, this is the last year of it. So
right,
soak it up, because if you've been on the mountain, it's been a good run, but next year it's gonna get nasty.
Well, speaking of the mountaintop, Shane, all the listeners can get there if they go over to MyBookie, sign up for a new account over at mybookie.ag today, and put in that promo code that SEC THATSEC over at MyBookie. They're willing to give you an instant 50% deposit match up to $1,000, so you can have $1,500 in your account today with that promo code ThatSEC over at mybookie.ag today. In the show notes, there is a link. Click that link, sign up. It would really, really, really help us out. We don't ask for much. Come on, be throwing $50, $100, whatever you can spare over at MyBookie, and fade our picks and reach at mountaintop like the rest of these SEC teams.
You know? 9. You know, they should be paying me for how bad these picks are.
Yep.
I still smell the mayonnaise. Get out there and put promo code that SEC and start making some money, because Lord knows I ain't.
Yeah, and don't forget to head on over to the rogueshop.com, CBD, THC, Delta 9, Delta 8. They got you covered over at rogueshop.com. Promo code SEC will get you 10% off your entire order. Orders over $100, free shipping. They'll send it in a discreet package, so you can have yourself a great time this weekend thanks to rogueshop.com. This is veteran-owned business, and this is 100% legal, so check them out. rogueshop.com, promo code SEC, 10% off your entire order, and again, free shipping over $100. And if you have any questions, call them. Go to the website, rogueshop.com. Give them a call. It would be my buddy Richard. It's a small business. He's going to be answering the phone, taking your questions. So again, rogueshop.com, promo code SEC. All right, Chase, you ready to kick it over to our interview with our buddy Nick Roush, Kentucky Sports Radio? Man, speaking of cloud, he's on cloud 9.
Oh, yeah.
So Kentucky Wildcats are
can't get to Georgia quick enough.
Yeah, so let's kick it over to this great interview with Nick Roush. All right, we're pleased to be joined by one of our favorites, Nick Roush, Kentucky Sports Radio. Huge game this weekend, Kentucky going down to Georgia. But before we get to that, Nick, I had to ask you real quick. You got to be feeling confident about this damn bourbon bet this year with Cousin Shane.
Oh man, but with all that laughter being laughed, I'm still like, it's got to be how Florida fans feel right now when they face Kentucky, where it's just like you feel good, but they still might come in and kick your teeth in. I mean, that's kind of the way Kentucky's treated Florida lately, and that's how the Tennessee game is, where you can feel good about it going up to kickoff, but that logo, that team, there's always a bad feeling when those two get together. But yeah, Tennessee, it's almost like Joe Milton isn't the best person to ever throw a football, right? Like,
and I know you've been enjoying that.
I mean, if he was that good, then he would have been playing over Hendon Hooker. Like it just, it reminded me of whenever Bobby Petrino said that Louisville's going to be even better on offense with Puma Pass at quarterback after Lamar Jackson left. It's like you can't. I mean, it's come on, like let's be smarter here. But Tennessee, they'll be all right. I do get the sense, Mike. I know you're covering all these teams that there is just. This year feels more chaotic because there isn't any team just really asserting its dominance. So even though Tennessee fell at Florida, which it's almost like it reminds me of Kentucky just not being able to win at Starkville. They can't win in Gainesville. They might not knock them too much by the end of the year because, I mean, I know obviously Alabama and Georgia are still on their schedule, but there is a lot of you got to play the games out. Missouri's showing us that right now. I mean, they might end up being a pretty darn good football team. When it's all said and done. So a lot still to be determined in the race for the top of the SEC East. And Kentucky, man, they could shake things up this weekend if they do something crazy down in Athens.
Yeah, and before we get to that game real quick, I wanted to ask you about the Florida game because I know you picked Kentucky. Yep. Everybody over there at KSR picked Kentucky. Big surprise there. But I also picked Kentucky, but only by 1 point. I mean, I thought this was a coin toss game. They just kicked their ass. Did you anticipate that big of a whooping?
I really thought that it could get hairy in the second half. I thought it might be one of those things where if you get Florida playing from behind, you make Graham Mertz beat you. That's not the strength of their team. But I thought Kentucky was going to do it by throwing the ball. I didn't expect for Ray Davis to have 190 yards on his first 9 carries and Kentucky to be up 23-0 10 minutes ago in the half. Like it was an absolute butt whipping up front. And it's one of those things that we weren't used to the offensive line play last year. It took us all aback to see Kentucky's football to just struggle in the trenches. And I didn't know. I knew they would be better this year with the addition of Marcus Cox, and you brought in some other heavy hitters in the portal. You thought they were going to get better, but I didn't know they had that sort of running game performance in them, and I didn't know Ray Davis had it in him either. This was a guy that going into the year, we just saw him as this very kind of cut from the same mold as Benny Snell, where it's like he's going to be in between the tackles, not very explosive, but he's going to get good yards. He's been outstanding. He's like a shot out of a cannon when he gets the ball in his hands. His 8 plays of 30 yards or more are the tops in the SEC. He is explosive. He's got breakaway speed, and he's also doing it out of the pass-catching game as well. So Ray Davis has turned out to be one of the best additions in the transfer portal in the SEC this fall. That was one of those where Cole Kublik kind of warned us. He said, listen, y'all aren't talking up Ray Davis enough, and he was right. I mean, it was clear that as soon as he got in the right system and got to play behind some competent offensive linemen, he could be a big weapon. And going into this Georgia game now, it's one of those where in years past, you just kind of had to – well, Kentucky's strength is running the game, but I don't think they can run against them. They showed last week that they can run against really anybody, even against the Georgia rush defense that hasn't been great this fall. So I'm not expecting another big 280-yard performance from Ray Davis, but I do think he can create some explosive plays that give the Cats a puncher shot down there in between the hedges.
Now, do you think that same formula, though, can work on the road against Georgia? And again, people get caught up in it's Georgia, number one. They're not number one. They have not been, and I've been screaming that all season long. And I'm just basing it on what I'm seeing. I'm not saying they're a bad team. They should be top 5, top 3 probably. They are very good. But this is not 2-time national champion Georgia. Auburn just ran all over them. The caveat there, of course, they did it more with the quarterback run game.
Right.
That's not exactly Kentucky's. I mean, they're not going to ask Devin Leary with his injury history to do that. So what's your confidence level that Kentucky can do some of those things against Georgia? Or will this have to be the game where Devin Leary finally kind of has like a breakout performance if Kentucky's going to win?
The part about this Kentucky team that has made my job difficult is that they seemingly find different ways to win every single week. And I see that as a sign of a good football team, a well-balanced football team that's going to make Kirby Smart's job difficult in this upcoming game. And I love when you see the offensive line coaches on Twitter that love to break down stuff inside and kind of explain it, where that 75-yard touchdown run that Ray Davis had, it wasn't your traditional zone, it wasn't your traditional duo, it was a little bit of both. And so I think the way that Liam Cohen is able to scheme up the run game is going to present opportunities. But you're exactly right. Like they can only eat so many no gains and 1 and 2 yard gains, hoping for explosives before they're going to have to throw over the top. And I think Devin Leary is due for a breakout game. I thought it was going to be last week. If you look back at Will Levis's first year under center with Liam Cohen, it wasn't until week 6 when he got rocking and rolling. He had his best performance, one of the best performances in his 2 seasons, lighting up LSU. I think he had a rushing touchdown and 3 passing touchdowns in the game. Absolutely torched them. They were firing all cylinders. Now, this Georgia team's a lot better than that LSU team. And the part that worries me is there are some injuries at wide receiver. The passing game struggles. They're as much on the receivers at this point as the quarterback. Leary, I think, has had to go through those growing pains, figuring out how to excel in a pro-style offense versus a spread. But a lot of it's on the receivers. Barry Brown, we saw some of the drops last year, and you kind of had to take the good with the bad. But the shocking development has been Dane Key, where our guy Clark Brooks at SEC StatCat, 15 of the 19 drops that he's tracked have been with those two. And I think 9 have come from Key, who was a physical guy last year as a true freshman, who was sure-handed, and he made those contested catches. He had that 55-yard touchdown against Florida. He single-handedly carried that offense to a win at Missouri, making difficult contested catches. So right now, he's dealing with something between the ears, and he's just got to work his way through that. Going up against this Georgia pass defense, it's not the ideal time to hope that he can work his way through that Devin Leary can have his breakthrough. But it's certainly there, especially when I'm confident that Leary's going to have time to throw the football. And that's where you can kind of get the tight ends in the mix. You can hit your checkdowns with Ray Davis. It's really weird, Mike, looking at this Georgia defense that was so good up front for so long. They're 13th in the SEC in sacks. Right, like their pass defense is good, but it's because they've got great guys in coverage. So, and their linebackers are good at covering too. So you can't really rely on your tight ends to just sort of win mismatches in one-on-one situations. So this might be a situation where Leary, even though he's not a runner, he can extend plays with his legs, and he can pick up some 5 and 6 yards to make sure they aren't too far behind the chains.
And what's your confidence level that Brad White can scheme something up to where, let's face it, you're not going to shut down Brock Bowers, but you just can't let him take over the game like he did against Auburn. What's your confidence level that the guy that many regard, that know what they're talking about, that Brad White's the best defensive coordinator in the SEC, that he can limit, at least make other guys beat you on that Georgia offense?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I've seen some good defensive football over the years at Kentucky. And last week, in general, I've never felt more confident about a Kentucky defense because they're not reliant on 1 or 2 guys to do it all from them. It's got 14 sacks, and I think it's from 8 different players. They've got 9 turnovers, and Maxwell Harrison is the only guy that's got multiple, right? Whether they're recovering fumbles or picking off passes. This is a very well-balanced group that Brad White's preaching, like, guys, don't press. The big plays are going to come. And that's what's happened so far this year. So I'm confident that they will force Carson Beck to be able to beat them through the air. And the thing about Brock Bowers, he is amazing. He's wonderful. He's going to be the best player that Kentucky plays all year. Do you know how many catches Brock Bowers had against Kentucky last year, Mike? 2 for 10 yards. So I know that Georgia didn't have to do a lot of that last year, but if Georgia's going to win, it's going to be a low-scoring game where they have to sort of force the issue defensively and give themselves short fields, because I really am, unless Brock puts on his superhero cape, which he's perfectly capable of doing. I mean, they have guys who are big and physical enough they can play in coverage with him to an extent. I don't know what special things he's got cooked up for him, but I don't think it's an impossible task to say that Kentucky can bottle up this Georgia offense and make them, win a game where they can only score 17 points.
Mm-hmm. And really, Nick, people throw out all these stats, yards, total, this, that. The only thing that matters is points and efficiency in scoring offense, scoring defense. And shout out Dave Bartu, CFB Matrix, for providing me this info. But do you have any idea, Nick, who leads the SEC in scoring offensive efficiency and is number 2 in scoring defensive efficiency, and it's not Georgia?
Is it Kentucky?
It's Kentucky. So there's one team that has a playoff profile or is closest to the playoff profile, and it's the Kentucky Wildcats. So that being said, what would surprise you more, a Georgia loss or a Kentucky win? I mean, I know it's the same damn thing, but what would be your personal reaction if they go into Athens and beat Georgia, who is an outstanding team? I get it, but they're not this Goliath that people are making them out to. They're beatable, and I realize the game's in Athens, so that makes it much more difficult. What would surprise you more?
I would be surprised if Georgia gave its best, if they put it together, because that's part of, they haven't had their breakthrough yet, just like Kentucky hasn't offensively. I'd be surprised if Georgia put it together and Kentucky was still able to come up with a win, just because it's so hard to. I mean, 0 number 1 teams have lost at home in the college football playoff era. It just doesn't happen because of that. You got the home team on your side, man. It's hard to lose. And if this game was at Kentucky, I would probably pick a Kentucky win. The way that Kentucky wins this game, though, there is a blueprint. They followed it last week, and it worked like a charm. They started fast. Kentucky's gone up 24-0 and 23-0 in both of their SEC games. They've gotten 3 and outs and forced turnovers in the opening 3 possessions of those games. Georgia is 17-17 on the scoreboard in first quarters this year. They've been bad. They've started slow, but then I want to say they're 156-28, outscoring their opponents in the second and third. So we're going to know a lot about which way this game's going just right after the first 15 minutes. If Kentucky can get stops and then create explosive plays offensively, this is all what really held Kentucky back the last 2 years in this game is their lack of explosiveness. They had the longest non-scoring drive of the year against Georgia last year. They went 13 plays, 57 yards, and threw an interception right there at the goal line, right? And then 2 years ago, they had the ball for almost the entire fourth quarter, went 13 plays, and then got the backdoor cover with Wan'Dale Robinson. I know a lot of Georgia bettors were mad about it. I was very happy about it. Kentucky doesn't have to be methodical to score points in this year's offense. They have big-time playmakers offensively, and that's really, I think, what this game comes down to. It's obviously the turnover margin. I mean, the last time Georgia lost a night game, it was because they turned it over 4 times against Kentucky, and Randall Cobb got the job done back in 2009. If Georgia's turning the ball over, Kentucky can win this game. And if Kentucky's creating explosives and hitting Brock Bowers' cape somewhere, putting a little kryptonite on that football, they can win this football game. It's there for the taking.
So I'm not putting this out till Thursday. Nick, have you made a prediction for the game?
I haven't settled in on an official final score, but I do think what's ultimately going to happen is that Kentucky, when the field gets a little bit tight, they haven't been good in the red zone. They're 13th in the SEC in the red zone. They've left 4 chances up off the scoreboard this year. And I think what's going to happen, it's going to feel kind of like the 2017 game where Josh Allen got an early interception. They got it down to the 20, and they weren't able to capitalize on touchdowns. And I think Georgia's going to win a 17-13 football game where Kentucky kicks too many field goals, and that just doesn't get it done. But the one thing I'm fascinated to see is if they are able to get off this hot start. People forget in 2019 it was a 0-0 ball game at halftime, and then Chris Rodriguez, a Georgia native, dropped the touchdown to go 7-0 up in the third quarter. Georgia hasn't had a lot of pressure, particularly in these home games in the second half. I mean, it was you blinked your eye and they had the lead over South Carolina in the third quarter. If Kentucky can put some game pressure on them in the fourth quarter, how's Georgia going to respond? So I'm fascinated to see it. Love to see the Cats put some pressure on the Dogs and shock the world and do the impossible on Saturday night. But ultimately, I think Georgia's guns. They ain't the same old Georgia, but they're still Georgia.
All right, last question for you, Nick. Really appreciate your time. I know you're trying to get to the game. You told me you got some things behind the scenes, so hopefully you make it down there. Let's assume you do. Over under a dozen grown men bark at you as you walk into that stadium.
Oh gosh. See, here's the thing. In previous years, before the Joker Phillips era, it would only be like 6. They didn't even pay us no mind. Oh, it might even get up to 2 dozen. We're going to get barked at a ton because Georgia fans know that if there's a team that's going to give them hell, it's the Kentucky Wildcats. It's a physical football game. They're going to beat each other up in the trenches. And as good as Georgia is on that offensive line, Kentucky front seven, man, ain't nothing to mess with. Deion Walker, he's coming at you. He's coming at you, dogs. He's going to be barking right back.
All right, before you go, tell the audience, where can they follow all your work?
I'm at Roush KSR. That's where you'll find me on Twitter. On the Kentucky Sports Radio YouTube channel is loaded with content. We'll appreciate you going over there and give us a subscribe. If you want to know about the Cats, we got you covered here at KSR.
All right, it's great stuff. I mean,
yeah,
he's one of the best out there.
I love it. I'll never forget 2 years ago him like a heat-seeking missile trying to find you when you bashed Will Levis. That was my first impression of Nick. And I was like, after that, I was like, I like this guy. It's extremely passionate, always putting out great content. And if you're ever curious what's going on in Kentucky, man, I think I've never seen an outfit strangle every other media outlet at a location. It's like it's KSR and nothing. Right. I'm sure there's a few other Kentuckys out there, but it's like these guys are just so like in depth with their analysis and stuff. It's fantastic follows.
Yeah, and they don't take themselves too seriously.
No, they're fun. They're fun.
Right up my alley.
That's what I like about it. Because some of these, they get a little too uptight.
Yep.
Not the KSR boys.
Well, you know who doesn't get uptight? Shane.
There's one. We haven't had him on yet, but
our buddy Mike Griffith over at DawgNation. Got to get the other side of this big matchup, Shane. And Dogs is number 1. And let's see what Mike has to say about this one. Well, we're pleased to be joined by one of our favorites, Mike Griffith from the AJC's DawgNation. Mike, thank you so much for taking this time.
You bet, Mike. I look forward to it, man.
Yeah, and what a week it is for DawgNation down there with Kentucky coming through. The battle of undefeated. We've had a couple of these, Mike, in recent years. Arkansas comes to mind, Tennessee, of course, and Kirby and company always come up big. Do you think they do it again this weekend?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't think it's just because it's Kirby and company or just because it's Georgia. I just think that Georgia matches up well with Kentucky. And, with all due respect to what Kentucky did to Florida last week, I mean, that was a really big win. It's 3 times in a row now that Kentucky has beaten Florida. You got to go back to 1951 when Paul Bear Bryant was the head coach in Lexington to find a time, I believe it was from 48 to 51, that Kentucky beat Florida 3 in a row. And hard to believe, Michael, that, Florida has now has lost 8 in a row to SEC East teams outside of Griffin Stadium. I mean, like what happened to the Florida Gators? That just the product is not matching the hype, and it's an interesting time for Florida to be sure. And there's been plenty of times, as you and I both know, where Florida's been on top, and their fans really rubbed everybody's noses in it. Let's be honest, for decades, their fans really let everybody know, and so I think right now there's probably. At first there was probably a lot of people that were happy to see Florida lose. Now they just don't talk about Florida. They just don't come up. They're just not relevant anymore. Kentucky, on the other hand, is, and you wonder if this is maybe the de facto SEC East championship. I certainly don't want to count Tennessee out. That Tennessee-Kentucky game's kind of gone back and forth. And Tennessee just had pretty major injury, obviously, to Brew McCoy. Everybody hates to see that. But to your point, this is a really big game, Saturday night in Sanford Stadium, 7 p.m. Georgia needs to win this game if they're going to win the East again.
Yeah, and to your point on Florida, Mike, I don't know if you saw this, but after the game, I believe Napier said, "But this is who we want to be. We want to be more like Stoops' Kentucky." And I can't imagine Steve Spurrier's reaction. I hope no one brought that to his attention because I can't imagine Steve Spurrier ever saying something like that.
Well, Coach Spurrier is a legend. He's on the Mount Rushmore of SEC coaches. I think with Kirby Smart, with his 2 national titles, and certainly Nick Saban and Paul Bear Bryant, that would probably be my list of 4. The way Coach Spurrier dominated in the 90s with 6 or 7 SEC titles, depending on how you count it, during his 12-year tenure there. He was only there 12 years. Seems like he was there a lot longer, but just so dominant and, breathed so much life into the SEC, really changed the complexion of the SEC when you think about the fun and gun and how that offense opened things up. The SEC was kind of a 3 yards in a cloud of dust league. And then Spurrier came in and really changed things around. And but to your point, I'm sure he's disappointed. Of course, he still has the Spurrier's Gridiron Grill there in Gainesville, and still a beloved figure. That I'm associated with the Steve Spurrier Coaching Award. It goes to the first-year coach every year, the best first-year coach. It was interesting. The first year, we had Shane Beamer and Josh Heupel split it, and I was talking with Coach Spurrier about it. And I was trying to explain that you can really only have one. Well, Chris Doring, who does the award with me, said you can try to explain that to him, but he's pretty dead set. And I said, Coach, I think we really need to pick one of these coaches. He said, no, what we're going to do is we're going to have 2, and it's going to work just fine, and everybody's going to be happy. And I said, well, his name's on the award, so I may be the chairman, but it's the Steve Spurrier Award. And so we had those 2. And, of course, South Carolina and Tennessee fans just love each other, so you can imagine how that went over. And then last year, Coach Sonny Dykes won the award. And Coach Spurrier poked fun at him for giving up over 60 points during the banquet. But he had a point to it, Mike. He said, the Gators gave up more than 61 year to a Big Red team, referencing the Nebraska game. And he said they won the title the next year. So maybe TCU would win it this year. But fast forwarding to this year, I don't think TCU is going to be winning much of anything. So
No.
Kind of a circuitous story there about Coach Spurrier, but it's all in fun, and I like to tell those stories and background. And I'm sure the Tennessee and South Carolina fans will always remember that special year when their coaches split the Steve Spurrier Award. That's a lot to stomach all in one. You got to share the award. It's got Spurrier's name on it, right? That's a lot to stomach.
Right. And hey, maybe Napier's got a point. I like to poke fun, particularly after a big loss, but there is something to be said for his comments because Kentucky, Mike, you know this as well as anybody.
No, wait, you're saying this with a straight face here. You're really are you really trying to sell this?
Well, no, wait, I'll get to it here. Kentucky, for whatever reason, I know Missouri last year gave Georgia fits, but to me, the team under Kirby that has given Georgia, the biggest test, so to speak, annually is Kentucky with their physicality, with their toughness. Now, they haven't beaten them, but hardly anybody's beaten Georgia these days, particularly in what have they won, 20 SEC games in a row. So is there something to be said for Kentucky being able to match Georgia physicality-wise? And I know they don't have the athletes, but they play tough, hard-fought games. And I don't know where you stand on this, Mike, but I've been screaming it for a month. I don't think Georgia's number one. I don't think they've earned that. They were number one the last 2 years. I get it, but I don't rank them on what they did last year or the year before. I rank them on what they did this year. And that's not to say Georgia won't win the title, won't win the SEC, but this is not Georgia of the last 2 years. This is 2023, and I think Kentucky can give them one heck of a ball game on Saturday.
Sure. No, I hear what you're saying. I think that's just a really awkward. If I'm Billy Napier, I'm not saying that. I just can't imagine saying that. That would just, like you said, that's hard for a Florida Gator to swallow, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I don't have Georgia number one on my ballot either, and I haven't. really since the first or second week of the season. I had Washington up there for a while. Got Texas number one right now. Thought their win in Alabama has gotten more impressive as Alabama's kind of gotten on track. That win in Tuscaloosa. Quinn Ewers, like I said, I don't know if he'll ever play another game like that again, but he doesn't have to. He did it that night. He was perfect. He had issues with the deep ball that particular night, though. Some great throw and catch. And, Alabama's quarterback was, Jalen Milroe wasn't making good decisions. I think as long as Milroe makes good decisions, they're going to be really, really hard to beat. We'll see what happens against A&M this weekend. But I'm with you. I don't just de facto Georgia number one. And I think, Kirby's fine with that. I mean, he even said after the last game, he said, I don't know how good this team is. I mean, to your point, they've trailed by 10 points in each of their first two SEC games to South Carolina at halftime, 14-3. And they were down 10-0 after the first quarter at Auburn. And then they were down again 17-10 in the third quarter after they turned the ball over on their opening possession. So Georgia's had to, a couple of uphill battles to win their first two SEC games. And, Kentucky coming into Sanford Stadium, is that a tougher assignment than playing on the road at Auburn? I don't know. That's tough. Auburn and Hugh Freeze do some things with the quarterback. And certainly I think Hugh is a really well-respected coach. As far as off the field, I don't know. You can throw them in the Lane Kiffin category, but these guys get paid for what they do on the field, and he's really good at his job. Mark Stoops is good at building a program, and you mentioned their profile being a real physical team. How will that match up against this year's Georgia team? That remains to be seen. I've said in the past, you're not going to out Kirby. But Georgia's interior defensive line has been somewhat suspect. Obviously, there's a big drop-off from Jalen Carter. The year before, they lost Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt, other first-rounders. And the next guys up, they're just not as good. I mean, they're still good, but they're just not as good. And it seems like fans want there to be this notion that, well, whoever's next up is going to be just as good or better. And it just doesn't work that way. I mean, I think you're seeing that at Tennessee right now at quarterback. I like their quarterback fine this year, but I don't think he's as good as Hendon Hooker was. I like their receivers too, but I don't think they're as good as the receivers were last year. Sometimes players are better than the year before. Sometimes they're worse. At Georgia, they haven't been as good in the interior defensive line. They haven't been as good in the offensive backfield. They haven't been as good at the other tight end position. They haven't been as good at wide receiver. And so we've seen some struggles. And I think the Kentucky game is going to be a litmus test of sorts because Georgia typically doesn't get out physical, Mike. I can only tell you 2 times, and I've covered Georgia since the 2018 season, the 2 times I've seen Georgia out physical, both by LSU, 2018 regular season in Baton Rouge and 2019 SEC championship game. That's it. Even when Alabama beat them, the times they beat them at Tuscaloosa and in the SEC championship games, I didn't feel like they out physicaled or pushed them around. So could that happen this year? We'll see. I thought Auburn, probably played them about even in the trenches. Let's see what Kentucky can do coming off that big win over, Billy Napier, who's a really nice guy. Just a wonderful guy. We all agree he's a good guy, and I think we all agree that the SEC wants to see Billy Napier at Florida for a long time.
How about the injury to Amarius Mims? I think that is obviously your readers are well aware of all that, but maybe nationally, maybe across the SEC, that's kind of went under the radar, perhaps. How big of a loss is that? Because in my outside observer eye, it seems to affect Georgia's offensive line to a major degree.
Well, they weren't going to be as good without the left tackle, Broderick Jones. I mean, he was about as good as pass blockers we've seen in the SEC in quite some time. Left tackle, first-round draft pick. And, Warren McClendon was a guy that had started like 37 or 38 games in a row at right tackle. Now, Marius stepped in at the end. And for those that don't follow it closely, and not everybody can go to SEC media days or read about every player, but Mims is this, Goliath, 6'8", 340-pound. I mean, if you tried to make up an offensive tackle in your video game, this is him. I mean, he's big, he's strong, he's fast, he's physical, he's he's all that, and he's their right tackle. He had to get the tightrope surgery on his ankle, so he's been out. I don't know how much it's truly affected them. They moved Xavier Truss out there. He's a fourth-year guy, I think. And they moved Dylan Fairchild. They have pretty good depth, and frankly, their running game is a little bit off the rails more because of the lack of depth. With Kendall Milton, who's been injured all year. Kirby said this week that Milton's looked good in practice, but Kendall had hamstring issues in fall camp. He kind of looked slow at the start of the year. Then he suffered a sprained knee against South Carolina, missed the next game against UAB, and only played 5 snaps against Auburn. I mean, if you get him back, great, but are you going to get that vintage guy back? Because we saw flashes of Kendall Milton that really looked like greatness, looked like a guy you'd say, oh, yeah, that's that could be another, big-time Georgia running back. But he hasn't looked like that this year, and we don't know what version of him we'll get against Kentucky. They're so thin back there. Brock Bowers carried on a 3rd and 2. He converted, of course, because it's just what he does. They've got a receiver back there, Dylan Bell, who's probably their number 2 running back right now. And, Dejon Edwards does a nice job, Mike, but, I don't think I'd put him in the same sentence with, Todd Gurley and DeAndre Swift and, Herschel Walker. So they're a little limited in the backfield. To your point, their offensive line is not as elite as it was a year ago. And it begs questions. Anytime you lose a guy like that, it begs questions.
Yeah, and I'm glad you referenced Brock Bowers, because I think he's the best college football player in the country. He may not win a Heisman or anything like that, but if they were giving it to the best player, he certainly has to be in consideration. Is there any way to stop him if you're Kentucky? I mean, what is the strategy if there is one? I mean, he's a guy I feel like you hope to contain him, and you can't let him dominate you like Auburn did in the fourth quarter.
Well, Georgia's lost 1 game since Brock Bowers has been on the team. 2021 was his first season. And in the 1 game that they lost, he had 10 catches for 139 yards. And Stetson Bennett threw the ball at him 16 times. And Nick Saban called him out and said this guy was really special as a freshman. So that was the 1 game they lost. He's a go-to guy. The Heisman Trophy and the politics around it, I'm a little sour on the whole thing. I really don't like it when perception overtakes reality. I guess if people repeat things enough times, it starts to be true. I think, Mike, what happened was, and I don't necessarily blame the TV people or the storytellers or whatever you want to call them. And every Saturday they wanted to tell you that story. But in doing so, they really did a disservice to the championship players around him. I mean, there was a lot of other reasons that Georgia won. One of them was Brock Bowers. More people should know about him by now. Others, Kenny McIntosh had over 1,000 yards. People didn't even talk about him. This guy's got like 12 or 1,300 yards rushing and receiving, didn't drop a pass his whole career. Crickets. Adonai Mitchell, he's at Texas now. He'll get more attention there than he ever did at Georgia. Fantastic pass catcher. And Georgia fans said, well, we know about him. Yeah, you do, because you watched every game. But when people tuned in to the CBS game or the ESPN game, it was the same storyline on loop over and over and over. And it wasn't even that accurate, as you've kind of seen. So there was a lot of guys that didn't get attention last year. Darnell Washington, this guy was 6'8", 270. You see him taking over in the NFL. He didn't get talked about. Lad McConkey just now starting to get some recognition. So a lot of people didn't really know how much Georgia was going to be missing, right? It was all, well, is the next quarterback as good? Well, the answer is that, yes, the next quarterback is as good, but he doesn't have as good of a supporting cast. And so people are, they're just now coming to the table and realizing that, wow, these guys, they did have some really special guys last year that aren't there anymore. And Kirby's talked about that. I'm not saying anything right now any different than what the head coach has said. Now I'll get skewered for it because I'm not the head coach and I cover the team and I'm supposed to, wave my pom-poms. But just the reality of it is they're not as good in the interior defensive line. They're not as good at their offensive skill positions. And they're growing. They're kind of in a reload mode. The schedule is very fortuitous. They have gotten better. They have played a lot of guys. They played 3 quarterbacks in a couple games. So the numbers don't really reveal how much growth and how much better this team's gotten. But, test number one is coming up Saturday night. Auburn was a test too. I shouldn't say that. Auburn was test number one on the road, and they found a way to win. Test number two is going to be against a more physical team. So you beat the crafty coach on the road. Now you've got to play the physical SEC East team that is familiar with you. They haven't played well, to your point. 2 out of the last 3 years, Stetson Bennett didn't even throw a touchdown pass against Kentucky. So they've struggled. Last year was a bit of a struggle. I think it was 16-6 or 16-7. A couple of years before that, it was 13 or 14-3. In between, they beat them like 30-13 at Sanford the last time Kentucky was here. Kentucky drove the length of the field and scored like in the final seconds to cover the spread. This is going to be different, though, and Carson Beck's going to be tested. He's going to get hit. Kirby and Mike Bobo are going to have to decide how much do they run the ball. Kirby oversees all this. It's his offense. How physical do they try to go? How much do they open it up? Is the passing game ready for this sort of test? Is the defense good enough to hold up? Florida thought they were pretty good against the run coming in, and Ray Davis, went for 280 yards and made every guy currently on Vanderbilt's team ask what how you get in the transfer portal, because they all want to get out of there and play somewhere where they can win games and people care about the program. So it's going to be a real test Saturday night for Georgia.
Yeah, and I'm glad you talked about Carson Beck. That was the last thing I had for you on the team, Mike. But what did he prove to you? Have you seen enough after that big performance on the road, hostile environment? And for anybody that didn't watch that game, I mean, it was neck and neck. Auburn had a lead at the end of the first. They had a lead in the third. The game was tied with, 4 minutes, I think, 3 minutes left in the game. They needed Beck to step up. And yes, he had Brock Bowers, but he made the throws that had to be made to win on the road. And I think that's getting overlooked as a huge test that he passed early this season.
Yeah, he was good on third downs. He was 8 out of 10 passing on third downs. I think 7 of those were conversion throws. 3 of them went to Ladd McConkey, who was on a pitch count. Don't really know about Ladd's back this week, how much he'll play, but pretty pivotal guy. He missed the first 4 games of the season. 2 of those conversion throws were to Brock, and 2 of them were to Ra Thomas, a transfer from Mississippi State, who I think continues to emerge. Him and Dominic Lovett were the guys that kind of slid in with Adonai Mitchell moving on and Dominic Blaylock going over there to Georgia Tech. So, Beck is good. Throw the ball to 19. He makes you a lot better. Just put it within 3 or 4 feet of him. He's got those go-go gadget arms. He makes those one-handed catches. He runs away from people. He runs through people. I mean, he makes quarterbacks look good, if we're being honest about it. His yards after the catch are phenomenal. But to your point, Carson didn't make mistakes. The one pick he had, it was not a bad throw. The receiver could have come back a little harder. DB made a nice break on it. But he makes the right decision most of the time. I think he's poised. I think he's fine. I don't think Carson Beck, and Kirby said this earlier in the week, that I don't think Carson Beck's going to determine whether or not Georgia wins a title, good or bad. Okay, so, I still wonder, do you need a running quarterback? Can Georgia get away with having a distributor at quarterback, or do they need more of a playmaker? Do they need an RPO guy? And that was kind of what happened to JT Daniels a couple of years ago. I mean, the guy's 7-0. He's set a school record for pass efficiency rating the year before, but Kirby, between his injury and then Stetson comes in, and then Kirby decides, what? I like the quarterback with mobility. I like that RPO angle. It's like adding one more offensive player, and so they stick with it. And so now my question becomes, does Georgia have the skill position talent to win with a distributor like Carson Beck? Carson's got good escapability, but he's not I don't think he's really a runner. He's a very good athlete. He had a baseball scholarship offer to Florida. Super talented guy, played AAU basketball. So, he's a fantastic athlete, but he's not a runner. Brock Vandagriff is a runner. So I look for things like, will Georgia eventually have to put in a package for Vandagriff? And what else does Georgia have in the toolbox, right? Like, we know this is a team that's got to get better to win a national title. You said it yourself. You don't think they've looked like number one. You don't have them number one. Kirby knows this. That's why Kirby said he didn't know how good the team was. What do they have to do to get there? Well, first they got to survive Kentucky. So Beck can't turn it over. He's got to continue to distribute the ball, make good decisions. Then they got, whatever against Vanderbilt. I'm not going to call it a bye week because they do have to get on the bus and go to the playing field. If I don't know where the stadium's at or how much of it's done or not.
It's a crater right now.
What's that?
It's basically a crater right now. It's a construction zone.
I mean, look, I know people are wondering, Mike, why I go out of my way sometimes to bring this to everyone's attention. I just think it's an embarrassment. It's like that house in the neighborhood, right? There's always that one, every nice day, there's always that one house where the people don't mow their grass or they don't keep it painted. And the thing is, this Vanderbilt, they get just as much money from the league as anybody else. And it's almost like they know they don't have to because they're in Nashville. It's like they're free pass. Oh, hey, you're not kicking us out because we're in Nashville. And then you just, man, can't you get it together? I mean, there's been coaches that have won there before. They've had momentum to build on. They've had opportunities with the city of Nashville building stadiums. And they just don't care. And that's frustrating to me because I don't see that with Northwestern in the Big Ten. I don't see that with Duke in the ACC. And why does Vanderbilt get away? And poor Clark Lee, I mean, the guy went there and, I guess they did beat Florida last year. But my point is, it doesn't have to be that way. And it's frustrating to me that stadium is there looking like that. And it's just an embarrassment to the league. And it doesn't meet the standard, and it's not true of baseball. Their baseball stadium's fine. The basketball arena is wonderful. But for whatever reason, they just won't make the commitment like the other schools in the league do. And that disappointing. That game's a week off. And believe me, I'm already tired of talking about it. But that's a week off. And then Georgia has a true bye week. And then they play Florida in Jacksonville about 370 miles from here or something like that, 70 miles from Gainesville. So they call it a neutral site game, but it's a road trip to Florida. Florida will take a bus, an hour over there, and then they'll try to take care of a Florida team that, who knows where they'll be by then, Mike. I mean, I'm sure you'll have other shows and you'll talk about the Florida-South Carolina game and all that. That's, to me, a really big game. But back to your original question, was on Carson Beck. I think he's fine. I don't think that's where the game is won or lost. I think the game is won or lost with turnovers. Simple as that. And it may not be Beck's fault. That's why I say that. Guys run the wrong pattern. Passes get tipped. Players don't come back for the ball. I think Carson Beck is fine. Don't put it all on his shoulders. But as long as he's got guys open, he'll hit them. He's not going to freak out. He's not going to pee down his leg in the clutch. We saw that twice already. He's come from 10 down. I think it's going to come down to turnovers and the trench battle. And can Kentucky dominate Georgia like they did Florida? I really doubt that. So I'm predicting a Georgia win. You may be right. It may be a slam bam right down to the last second. I don't know. I've seen Georgia control Kentucky, and I guess in my mind, it's still a 2 or 3 touchdown win until Kentucky shows me otherwise.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time. Before you go, can you tell my audience, I'm sure they know already, but in case they don't, where can they find you and where can they find all your work?
Sure. I appreciate it, Mike. You can find me on Twitter at Mike Griffith 32. And then we have our DawgNation.com website and Facebook page and YouTube page. And I appreciate your help and I enjoy working with you. These are fun podcasts that you do. And I think you do a great job yourself. And certainly I enjoy watching you on the Feinbaum Show. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, Shane, another great one from Mike. That guy always delivers, doesn't he?
Yeah, Mike. I swear. Again, media days, you go back to some of these guys and he's just got an aura around him. It's like, I think he's probably hit more tables down there than anybody,
That's what I was going to say. When we were getting him, I mean, he had to make 10 stops on the way over because they're like, hey, Mike, we got to get you on. We got to get you on. What time can we get you?
That's right.
Every booth
like
there.
Shefty just running around. Everybody wanted to know what the insiders he's got down there in Georgia.
Yeah. So I really appreciate both those guys taking the time to join our show. I appreciate all the questions, helping the mailbag be another successful edition there, Shane. And most of all, I appreciate you for being a man of your word and taking that Mayo like a man.
Absolutely.
Anything else before we hop off the line?
Oh, no, man. I'm glad, again, got that bet out of the way, and it's been fun. And be sure to tune in tomorrow. We're going to be doing our picks, and you can find out if Shane's going 1-10 or is he going to get back on the winning side of the column. So I think so. I think it's about time.
Yes, sir. Well, all right. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking us out. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right. See you guys. Go Vols.